This week on SUNUP, do you know how much water you're pumping for irrigation?
Well, we'd like to see if there's opportunities for people to save both energy and water.
Scott Frazier explained some of the future research into flow. You may have felt the earth move. Paul Weckler shows us what to check once everything settles down.
Those buildings, a lot of them are not built to modern building codes, and those can have severe structural damage.
Oklahoma agriculture starts right now at SUNUP.
Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. An Oklahoma earthquake made national news this past week, one of the strongest we've ever recorded here. The magnitude and frequency of the earthquakes raises plenty of questions, and for some answers, we recently caught up with Paul Weckler, our ag engineer who specializes in structures.
So hopefully that's not going to happen, but I lived almost 25 years near the San Andreas Fault in California, and so we had to be prepared for the big one. And of course, safety, protecting your loved ones is the first priority. And if the big one happens, you need to be aware that you could have gas leaks. Most houses here in Oklahoma have natural gas or propane, and those can develop leaks, or you can even have the lines break. Extreme structural damage. If, say, your chimney collapses into your house, or you're in an older masonry brick building that is fairly common in some of the small towns in Oklahoma in their old downtown sections. Those buildings, a lot of them are not built to modern building codes, and those can have severe structural damage and even collapse. So there is life-threatening dangers if the big one hits.
It seems like we talk about earthquakes almost every day. It seems like there's one happening in Oklahoma in that 3.0 to 4.0 range. When those are happening, what do I need to be mindful of as a homeowner?
Well, first of all, you should keep real current and up to date on the status of your house, and just continually monitor it and check it, because here in Oklahoma we have soils that shrink and swell with moisture, and after the drought a lot of people had damage due to shifting of their foundations, and then this past year's plentiful rain caused the ground to swell, and so that can cause damage to your home. And so you need to be able to determine if any damage like this crack right here occurred due to an earthquake or due to the ground shifting because of moisture in the soil. And so this is a very common occurrence. This is really cosmetic, because most of these houses built like this with a brick veneer, this is not structural. Underneath this brick there is 2x4s, 2x6s, and wood framed structure that is really the best for earthquakes, because that wood can flex and kind of ride out the earthquake. But the problem is the brick doesn't flex very well. And so whether it's the ground moving due to droughts or too much moisture, or the ground moving due to earthquakes, you will see cracks like this occur. And you can see it comes down through where the natural gas pipe comes in. And so that's a very common occurrence, and I have some of those cracks in my house. You'll also see cracks on the inside around doorways. Sheetrock will crack if the house moves too much. Think on the farm or the ranch, you need to look at some of your grain storage and other type buildings. Also, any water storage or water piping systems may be damaged, the pipelines due to the ground movement in an earthquake.
In Oklahoma, we're used to weather phenomenons. Our houses are built pretty solid, right?
Right. We have to endure the high winds of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. And so the modern building codes require the frame of the house to be attached well to the slab or the foundation. The roofs need to be attached properly. And so Oklahoma, you know, has requirements due to the, you know, severe weather situation that, you know, makes our houses fairly strong. Now, we don't design typically to the stringent earthquake standards that they use in California. Hopefully we won't have to do that, but our houses usually are pretty good shape.
Okay, Paul Weckler, great information on earthquakes, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cow-calf producers that have some yearling heifers that they're going to breed this spring need to be aware of any change that they might have as they're, say, moving some heifers from one diet or one pasture to another pasture. For instance, if they're taking heifers off of wheat pasture and moving them into a headquarters situation, they may find that those heifers have really had a change in their diet that adversely affects their ability to cycle and breed. Research here at Oklahoma State University a number of years ago took a good look at this. What they did, they had a set of heifers that they had them all gaining. They were fed 120% or 20% more than they needed just to maintain their weight. They're growing, they're doing well. All of those heifers they know are cycling. Then they take half of the heifers and change their diet dramatically to only 40% of what they need to maintain their weight. So those heifers got about 1/3 as much protein and energy as the control heifers that were left on that growing diet. At 2 weeks' time, then they were given estrus synchronization drugs, and using ultrasound, they looked to see which of the heifers were still cycling, which ones would ovulate, therefore having a chance to breed in an AI program or even naturally with a bull. What they found was those heifers that had changed from that growing diet of 120% of maintenance down to 40% of maintenance, that only 30% of those heifers were still cycling, as compared to the control heifers that got the good diet all the way through. All of those continue to cycle and ovulated at the end of the estrus synchronization. That tells me that we want to be careful about when we're taking heifers off of wheat pasture, for instance, perhaps sometime in April, and moving them into a headquarters in order to do our AI program, or even to put them into a breeding pasture with bulls, that we don't have that real sudden drop-off in nutrition that could cause these heifers then to decrease the amount of cycling activity we have and decrease the percentage of them that we would get bred to an AI program. Plan that movement carefully and plan the diets carefully that you're going to feed those heifers as you move them into a different situation, so that they continue to grow and continue to gain weight into and through the breeding season. You'll be much happier with the percentage that you get bred. You'll be much happier next spring when you're getting all those calves on the ground. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
There's a pretty big gap right now between prices and the cost of production. Kim Anderson is here to help us sort it out. And Kim, for perspective, just start at the beginning.
Well, let's look at the United States percentage of world production, which is this last year was 7.6%. The 5-year average is about 8.1%. The moral of that story is that the world wheat production is significantly more important to determining our price than our production is. If you look at world production, each year for the last 3 years, we've set a new record, finishing this last year at 27 billion bushels, all 3 years above 26 billion. If you look at world wheat use or consumption, again, we've had records over the last 3 years, but significantly lower. This last year was a record 26.1 billion bushels, 900 million below this year's production. And if you look at production versus consumption or use over the last 5 years, for each year, production's been 300 million bushels higher than use.
And where are prices at right now?
Well, as you'd expect, they're way down. They're down is what I would call the bottom. We've had a down trend going since February of 2013. I think we've had a sideways pattern since about August of this last year, between $4.40 and $5.21. Our current cash price is down below $4 in most of Oklahoma. It's ranging anywhere from $3.80 to $4.10. You look out at to harvest, you got that July contract somewhere around $4.70, $4.75. Our bids are 60 to 40 cents less than that, so it gives you a harvest price of $4.15 to about $4.35.
And what about the cost of production then?
Well, that's the bad news. Cost of production for most farmers, depending on how they put in a land charge, is anywhere from $4.15 to $4.50 to $5.15, and that does not include your fixed cost of production, which is going to run it significantly higher than that.
And what do you see happening in the next marketing year then? Some of the same?
Yeah, I think more of the same. If you look at the world production, probably only Argentina will have higher production this next year than it had last year. China is probably lower. The Ministry of China says that production is going to be higher, but the private sector says it's going to be significantly lower. The European Union, the second largest producer, is probably lower. India, even to lower. The United States, we may be higher than last year. However, we have a lower amount of planted acres. And I think world production will be less than last year. And
then, of course, the question on everyone's mind, what will it take to get those higher prices that we all love?
Well, I think world production is going to have to be down 1.5 billion to 2 billion bushels. We had a 27 billion bushel crop. We only used 26.1 billion of it. There's 900 million you got to take off the top there. So I think to get higher prices, the world production needs to be at or below 25 billion bushels, or 2 billion less than last year. 1.5 billion will get us slightly higher, but if we want good prices, we got to take 2 billion off this crop.
Okay, Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. We're moving towards spring in Oklahoma, and that means lots of changes in weather. We're lucky this year to finish winter with some decent soil moisture. A map of plant available water for the top 32 inches of soil shows much of the state colored dark green with 90% or more of plant available water. The light green and yellowish areas are closer to 70% or less. When fire conditions are a concern, firefighters monitor fuel moisture. A map of dead grass fuel moisture at 4 a.m. Wednesday morning showed only a few areas below 10%, the tan color. A number of locations were above 20%, green colors. 12 hours later, at 4 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, the vast majority of Oklahoma had dead grass, 1 hour fuel moisture at 5%. At 5%, fires that start burn rapidly and jump readily. First hollow stem stage for early group wheat varieties is progressing rapidly across the state. Red-colored areas have a 50% or higher probability of having reached first hollow stem. Middle group varieties are about a week behind the early group. Now here's Gary with a look at 2016 rainfall so far.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, I hate to do this to you. I really thought it would take longer for us to have to start looking at the drought monitor map again, but sure enough, this week Oklahoma's depiction has changed. So let's get right to that map and take a look at it. Well, we haven't seen big changes, but you can see that D0 or abnormally dry yellow area down in south central Oklahoma and also out around the Roger Mills, Beckham County area in far western Oklahoma. That's not a big change. It's not drought itself. It shows building dry conditions. But if you look at the overall map for the United States, you can see drought and abnormally dry conditions starting to spread across a large area of Texas. And of course, that is what is spreading up towards Oklahoma with our dry weather we've seen so far this year. And if you look at the Oklahoma Mesonet rainfall map since the beginning of the year, you can see why. Most of the state has seen less than an inch for the year thus far, and nearly all of the state has seen less than 2 inches. In other words, most of the state has seen from 60% to less than 20% of normal for that time period, other than far southwestern Oklahoma up through parts of central Oklahoma, which have actually seen a surplus. We have measured a statewide average of about 1 inch since the beginning of the year. That's about 1.6 inches below normal, and the 13th driest such period since at least 1921. So here we go again. We need some rainfall. We need it pretty badly. We would take snow, just about anything other than ice. So we'll see what the coming weeks hold, but we are entering spring. Hopefully we will enter a wetter pattern as we get into that time period. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Irrigation has become pretty important over the past few years, and we're out here with Scott Frazier. You guys are calibrating some research tools that have to do with irrigation.
Yeah, that's right. We've got some flow meters here that the folks from NRCS are calibrating. We've also got a flow meter that we have that we're calibrating. Basically, it's an instrument that tells us how much water is flowing through pipes, so we don't have to break into the pipes. We can measure it from the outside.
That is one cool thing about it. These instruments are actually using ultrasound technology?
Right, it's the same kind of technology that you'd use to look at a baby. In fact, it's got some of the same kind of gel and things like that. So it's strapped on, and then there's a computer that basically tells us what the flow rate is.
Why is that important for irrigation, or the irrigation industry?
Well, if you're testing an irrigation like a center pivot, which is one of the things we're trying to do, trying to figure out its energy and water efficiency, one of the first things that you test is the flow going through the pipes. And if you have to break open the pipe and try to catch the water, that's a major ordeal. So this is a fairly convenient way of doing that, and so that's one of our primary measurements.
Talk about some of the research that OSU is doing in conjunction with the ARS.
Sure. We were able to get a couple of grants, one through the Division of Agricultural Sciences, another through the USGS, and we're looking at the efficiency of irrigation systems in the panhandle of Oklahoma and the western part of the state. So we'll be spending the next year and a half probably doing that.
What are you hoping to find from the research?
Well, we'd like to see if there's opportunities for people to save both energy and water. So there's a cost savings opportunity there. And then one of the areas that we're interested in is the Ogallala Aquifer, which is being drawn down pretty good over the last few years. And we want to see if maybe there's a way to have a soft landing on that, curtail some of that, and still be able to produce the same amount of crops.
And some of that, and all of that starts here at the research unit.
Right. The flow measurements that Don is doing with Dustin here, that's a critical measurement, and that has to be right. So this is the ARS lab has this nice calibration facility here where we can tell exactly what the flow rate is, and then we compare it to the machines that we have.
Because to me, the layperson, this just looks like a large tube, but there's actually pressurized water in there.
Right, there's water that's coming down from the lake, and it's going into basically this is a calibrated orifice. Inside the building back over here are some instruments that tell us exactly what the flow rate is. We can adjust it by several valves both here and inside the building, and then we basically see if our equipment is telling us the same thing. It's very unusual to have this kind of facility where you can come and test your equipment.
And it's all right here, just on the other side of Lake Carl Blackwell.
That's right. When you're on the lake, you never know that this is here.
Yeah.
But it's a large facility, and we're very thankful that ARS is allowing us to use it.
Now, we're out here talking about irrigation sensors. Now, there's also an irrigation conference coming up soon.
That's right. March 8th in Woodward at the Woodward Fairgrounds, I believe. It's going to be a large irrigation conference. If that's something that you're interested in, you ought to stop by. We'll talk about our grants that we're doing. The NRCS folks, Don Strnitsky will be there, and he'll be talking about some of the flow testing and other things that NRCS is doing.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. And for more information, you can go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
To celebrate Valentine's Day, we're talking about a topic today that's near and dear to a lot of people, and that is chocolate. Nurhan Dunford, our oil and oilseed specialist, joins us now. And let's just start in general. How is chocolate made?
As we all know, the main component of chocolate is the cocoa beans. And the process starts with choosing the right cocoa beans. Depending on where they grow, the flavor profile of cocoa beans could be really different. So the beans are fermented, because without fermentation, we don't get that chocolate flavor. And then to intensify the chocolate flavor, sometimes the beans are roasted, and then the other ingredients such as sugar and cocoa butter is added, and then the mixture is tempered a long time. The tempering period is very important for intense and smooth chocolate flavor.
You have several examples for us here, including dark chocolate. Why is dark chocolate considered healthy?
Cocoa beans contain antioxidants. So dark chocolate contains higher amounts of cocoa solids, which means it has more antioxidants and less sugar and less fat. So here we go.
That's it in a nutshell. And then I see there's different percentages of, dark chocolate in these bars. Can you explain that for me?
There are different grades of chocolate or types of chocolate bars, and the type of chocolate is determined by the amount of cocoa solids present in the formulation. But about 90% cocoa solids in the product makes the product really bitter. So higher the cocoa solid doesn't necessarily mean high quality or better chocolate.
Okay, that's good to know. So that sorts that out. And then in terms of shopping and looking for chocolate, there's also sugar-free to think of. And what else do we also need to think about?
As I said the chocolate is the main component is cocoa beans. First, we need to look at the amount of cocoa solids present in the formulation. And then there are other components such as sugar. You can see just regular chocolate bars in the stores, but they're also sugar-free. That doesn't mean low calorie. It has the same calorie, but it doesn't have the regular sugar in the product.
Some great things to think about when buying and also eating chocolate. Nurhan, thanks a lot.
Duckweed is an interesting plant that usually doesn't cause problems in a pond. In our typical pond, the wind action is enough to keep it blown over to the side. Where it becomes a really serious problem is in ponds that are almost totally protected from wind. Ponds that are down in a little hollow or surrounded by trees. In that situation, it can be a very bad thing because it spreads rapidly, reproduces rapidly, and covers the entire surface of the pond. Never let any plant cover the surface of a pond entirely. When you do that, you're preventing light from getting into the water column. That prevents photosynthesis, that prevents oxygen production, and that leads to a fish kill. So don't let it get to a point as bad as in this pond. Take steps to have it identified by your county extension office and see what you can do in the way of an herbicide application or other control measures. For duckweed, one of the most practical things to consider in the way of herbicides would be reward. So please do get after it early. Once it becomes thick and covering the entire pond to a depth of several inches, you are facing a major labor in applying something and trying to thin that out to get foliar coverage by the herbicide. Water willow is a plant that we often find along the edges of lakes and ponds. It is sometimes planted on purpose because it is excellent for shoreline erosion problems. You may not have ever noticed it in your pond, but if you do, I would encourage you to take a closer look at it because In the middle of the year, it will develop some very beautiful but tiny blossoms that remind you very much of an iris or an orchid. But should you find it a problem in your pond, you might want to visit with your county extension office about some herbicides for spot control or perhaps larger areas. An aquatic 2,4-D or Aquamaster are two that I would consider thinking about, but as always, you need to make sure that you do not overlook the withdrawal times for certain purposes such as swimming or livestock watering. So do visit with your county extension office if you have problems with this or any other aquatic plant. There's a temptation to use an aquatic herbicide that you might be using on your field or in your yards on aquatic sites. I recommend against that in general. There are some herbicides that have the same active ingredient, yet are much more toxic to aquatic life because of a difference in the formulation and in the surfactants that are used. The glyphosates are one case in point. You need to use an aquatic glyphosate and not use the standard glyphosate when you're treating a pond edge.
That'll do it for us this week. I'm Lyndall Stout. Be sure to check us out on social media, and remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at sunup.